Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you're new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and a link in the info box below the video once it's rendered. But most importantly, if you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show. Sharing the show increases the live audience, of course, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by A Plain Truth, Chocolate Saying, and Arwin. How are you all doing?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Morning, good morning.
Good morning, good morning. Beep, beep. Good to have you.
Morning, guys.
Morning. So, general housekeeping?
Yesterday's hangout was a blast, wasn't it?
It was alright. I think they're all brilliant. Equally. Why did you say that, Arwin?
Yeah.
What was it about yesterday's?
Well, I'm usually just, besides monitoring the back chat and inserting my ideas when I get the chance, just tuning in on the atmosphere and the overall level of consciousness and mindset. It's just a feel for it. And it seems like the atmosphere is shifting and we're getting more grip and the Globers are getting less grip. And they are starting to sense themselves that their grip is faltering.
Their grip on reality.
It's just going away, and they have a looming sense of desperation now, and it's making them more aggressive. But also others are getting more pacified by it. So more Globers are turning into pure trolls, and others are just, they are kind of trying to take a few steps back and see, like, hey, we might actually really have to concede up to a certain level, spiritually at least, and try to see if we can reconstruct it somehow. And they are making brave attempts, and you are smiting them pretty brutally, because yeah, you're a gladiator, Nathan, and whenever you're winning, you just pump up the power. So it's getting a little brutal here now. But yeah, it's just something that I've noticed. The atmosphere is changing.
Well, I think the brutality is necessary to some extent, because it's like these guys, when you say they're losing their grip, yeah, they're losing their grip on reality and things that we're seeing and things that we're experiencing, and they're just trying to interject their scientism bullshit, pardon my French,
but they always do
into
that.
what we see, into our world. Well, I think it's time that shit's got to be shut down, man. I mean, come on.
Always done
How
that.
many times are you gonna try to stick that stuff into my face? You know?
I'm not really talking about grip over reality. I'm more talking about the background feelings and how they feel about things. And that is changing. Their views aren't changing, not really. But the feelings behind them, they're changing.
Yeah, but like you said, they're starting to see that their arguments aren't really holding any weight.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, I think it's getting to them psychologically.
It is.
And Nathan destroying them like that doesn't really help.
Agreed.
You know,
which is why they keep coming back. And, you know,
we've
the
heard
ones
them
that
say,
do come back. Go ahead, Plain.
I was just going to say there's a couple of times when I've heard them say, you know, whatever reason or explanation we give you, you guys don't accept. And I was reminded of the numerous conversations I've had with my children where they say, "You're not listening to me, Dad." And I say, "Yes, I am listening to you. I just disagree with your explanation. It's not reasonable. It's not logical." And then I have to point out in their explanation why it doesn't stand up. So it's not simply that that we are rejecting their proofs out of hand. That's not it at all. We're not being childish.
No.
We're rejecting
But they
their
are.
explanations and their presentations on the face of logic and reason.
Yeah, but that's the
It's a
problem is
structure.
that they
We
are
are
being
getting better at
childish.
structural analysis of the forms of reasoning, of the train of thought, of the processes, and how they are built up, and where the tricks are, where the misconceptions and the presuppositions are, and we are defining them in detail. And that is something that they haven't really specialized in. That's not their main focus. They are more focused on maintaining the whole body of science structure to make it seem like it is complete and infallible.
And
And
Big shout out to Earth is Seriously Flat for the super chat. It says, Happy Father's Day on our stationary flat Earth. Thank you very much indeed.
look how real the cognitive dissonance is though. Like just yesterday we were presenting something to this dude, I don't remember his name, and from Wikipedia, and he was denouncing it right there, and it's right there in front of his face. We're showing it to him, and he's still saying no, no. Like, what do you do with that? You know, what do you do with that when you're trying to make somebody see a point, and you bring up something and you put it right there in their face, and they're still denying it? You know, this is what you believe, and it's right here, and you don't want to accept it still.
Well, I
Like,
think
what's
that
wrong
that's
with you
still,
at that point?
yeah, I think that still goes along with my childhood analogy. That is that
yes,
even though I've rationalized with my 13-year-old and he looks at me and thinks I'm an idiot because I don't see it his way, you just have to simply present the material. And like Arwen is saying, in terms of there's going to be a point of saturation where they just start to they start to see it, but we have no control over that.
nope.
You know, all we can do is continue to present the material and try to do it in a way that's consistent.
Now, what
Mm.
we are doing by specializing in the substructure of how these images, how these concepts are constructed, we are basically forcing them to get into the substructure themselves. Although doing that for them is a risk factor because it unravels the very structure of the whole body of science as it works. So if they are forced to specialize themselves into understanding how their religious construct is constructed, then that will break the seams apart, and
It,
they will
it,
then eventually start to see how it is flawed.
Big shout out to Raven Song for the super chat. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Another Father's Day well wish. Really appreciate it.
yeah, let's say that. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. We
Yeah,
celebrate
Father's
that
Day
type of
here,
thing.
which is a weird experience because I'm a relatively new father. So you wake up and don't expect the day to be much, and then you get given a card for no reason. I was like, what's this? You know, why do I deserve this? But apparently that's something.
Hey
That's a
man,
thing.
hey man, but that's cool.
So should we do a bit of quick housekeeping? Anybody found any signs of curvature? Anybody?
Nope,
Axial rotation? Anybody?
nope.
Pressurized system next to a vacuum? Any signs of that?
Can't say, can't say that I have.
Self-perpetuating molten iron core?
Mm.
Scientific evidence for R? Any of that? Anybody?
18.
No?
What do you say, Arwen?
18.
18? What's that? What's 18?
Yeah, R rating. R certifications was different. European joke.
Gotcha.
Hi Milo, how you doing?
Hello. Happy Father's Day, everybody.
Thanks. It's not Father's Day out there, is it? You're in the States, right?
I think today's Father's Day.
Oh,
I
fair
said
enough.
Happy Father's Day to my father, so I don't know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's Father's Day out here.
Another shout out to Seriously Flat. Thank you very much.
So I have a question for you, Nathan.
Oh,
Is there an example of a hypothesis that you can show me that doesn't affirm the consequent?
I haven't got any examples of anything scientific. I'm not presenting anything scientific here at all.
Okay, so are you aware that if-then statements are inherently affirming the consequent?
Sorry, was there a question in that?
I'm asking you if you're aware that hypotheses inherently have to affirm the consequent, or else they're not a hypothesis.
Well,
If-then statements are affirming the consequent, it's necessary.
Do you mean they have to presuppose their conclusion? Is that what you're saying?
No, they have to affirm the consequence. So if it's an if-then statement,
that's not affirming anything, though, is it? That's if.
Excuse me?
Have you realised the trip up in your logic there? So if, that's not affirming. It's an if statement.
Right. So then why'd you call my hypothesis affirming the consequent?
Because it is.
How?
If gravity, so you're automatically assuming gravity, right?
But if is the word that you said.
So if gravity, correct? That's your statement. That's your hypothesis.
Yes.
If gravity. So how do you vary that independent variable?
Mass.
Sorry, you just said gravity. Do you understand how your scientific hypothesis falls apart?
Well, I'm mainly
is it mass or is it gravity? Which one is it?
Well, my hypothesis was mass attracts mass.
So what the hell's this got to do with gravity then?
That's
your
what the
independent variable is mass,
That's
according to you. Even though mass is a concept, it's not something you can manipulate. It's a concept, right?
How can't you manipulate?
Same way
mass?
you can't manipulate time. It's a concept. Stopping your watch doesn't stop time. It's just a concept.
So mass doesn't exist.
Is a concept, like angles. Yeah, you show me the formula for an angle.
No, the thing is that mass is a property of matter.
Yeah, it's a concept.
Right, and it can be detected, and it can be.
Right, so your independent variable is a concept. Right, this is not a valid hypothesis. Sorry.
So what you're saying is that mass cannot cause anything.
I'm saying mass doesn't attract mass, and you don't have a valid hypothesis to go forward and experiment with. Unfortunately, you have nonsense.
Can mass be a cause of anything?
No. It's a concept.
Aside
mass
from,
doesn't cause anything. Mass is not the cause of anything. No. Do you understand that? Clearly not.
So there's no other example where you can increase the mass of an object and affect the force from that increase.
I don't care. You're formulating this crap hypothesis to try and justify Cavendish, right? This is your. Why is it that you guys do this, right? This isn't my problem. Like the perspective thing. I get people saying, you formulate how to do this perspective reduction. So I don't care. This isn't my problem. It isn't my problem that you've got a crap hypothesis that you can't formulate into a scientific hypothesis to go forward and experiment with. That's not my problem.
Well, I'm trying to expose the how ridiculous your objection is.
What, that you're affirming the consequent? You are.
No, well, hypothesis affirms the
formal
consequent.
Logical fallacy.
Period.
That's what you are doing. You are saying,
excuse me?
If gravity, then mass attracting mass, therefore gravity, and you use a piece of apparatus that's totally in just a nonsense sideshow affair. It's not independently verifying anything. It's not isolating any variables. It's just useless sack of crap that you use to extrapolate out data that's nothing like the experiment. So the end values that you end up with, i.e. demonstrating the weight of Venus and the weight of Mars and the weight of Earth and the weight of Sun, all from the G constant, which is derived from that experiment, the two are non-linked, then just nothing to do with each other. And the experiment isn't an experiment. It doesn't have a valid hypothesis. You can't formulate it into one after the fact. If it did have a valid hypothesis, you could just Google search it and present it. Yeah? You trying to formulate it here and now, 100 years later, is just stupid.
This is an independent verification of a claim.
A scientific hypothesis, right, is a prediction. That's what a scientific hypothesis is. It contains two things, an independent variable and a dependent variable. Yeah, that's it. It expresses the experiment that you will go forward as an if-then statement. That's what a hypothesis does.
Yeah, if-then statements are inherently supposedly consequent.
Really? If? Yeah. An if statement affirms something? Does it? You're affirming a consequent with an if statement, are you? You're just talking shite. Shut up. This is nonsense.
Yeah. Okay, so if I give a plant an unlimited amount of sunlight, then the plant will grow to its largest possible size. That's a hypothesis. The hypothesis is assuming that if I give a plant an unlimited amount of sunlight, it's assuming that the plant will grow to its largest possible size. That's a hypothesis that assumes the conclusion of, because that's what a hypothesis is.
Right, and then you go forward and you experiment. If you've got a valid hypothesis, you can then move forward and experiment and test whether or not your independent variable does indeed affect your dependent variable.
Right.
Once you have isolated all of the other variables so that you are only testing those two things.
So what was my independent variable?
I don't know. You tell me. You have given me two. You've said gravity and you've said mass. Neither are viable. Neither are viable.
No, you've made up gravity as my independent variable.
You told me it was gravity. If gravity, you said. Are you now retracting your nonsense that you stated earlier? Don't contradict yourself here, right? I've got a decent enough memory. I'm not a goldfish. If gravity was your statement, now you're saying that's not your statement. You don't even understand your own bloody nonsense.
Nathan, I gave a detailed...
Yeah, you gave me if gravity. Then when I pointed out that that's not an independent variable, you said if mass and changed it. I then pointed out that you changed your independent variable, therefore proving you have not the slightest clue what you are doing.
Nathan, when we spoke yesterday, I did not give gravity as my independent variable.
I don't care. I asked you now. I asked you here. I don't care what you said yesterday. I'm saying now. You don't have a valid hypothesis.
I gave you one yesterday, and I'll give it to you again today.
Okay, fine. Let's have it back again. What's the alternate hypothesis?
The alternative hypothesis is the hypothesis. I want you to be clear about that.
What is it? Let's hear it.
All right. I'll make it even clearer for you. If you increase the mass of an object, you proportionately increase.
If mass, if a concept, if mass. I've already gone through this. Are you deaf?
Oh, mass,
this is a concept.
So what?
Right, your independent variable is a concept.
Are we debating whether or not mass exists?
It's a concept.
Is it real?
It's a concept. It's not something you can physically manipulate as a researcher. It's a conceptual thing. You're just too dumb to get it.
But you can manipulate
this conversation,
mass.
Milu. This is tedious.
Nathan, how can you can manipulate?
Stop
mass?
asking me. Stop asking me. Go away. Figure it out. Piss off. I'm bored of you.
You can change the amount of substance, amount of material, but you cannot manipulate the mass, the set value of the mass of the material.
Arwen, if you have a 5
kilogram set.
Mass is a concept.
If you have a 5 kilogram ball and you add 5 kilograms to it, you've increased the mass of this ball. You understand that, right?
No, you just made more. The mass is the same.
How?
Just the total mass and the volume has changed.
God, I've got a sniper.
No, I think you're confusing yourself, Arwen. If you have a 5 kilogram object and you add 5 kilograms to it, you've changed the mass of the object.
One just got sniped.
So, you know, you can
Let me ask you something.
Uh-huh.
In this Cavendish experiment.
Sorry, can I just while I was sorting out that sniper? Sorry to cut you off there. So, if you increase your mass, as you have just described with 2 balls, have you also increased surface area, for example?
Have you also increased surface area?
Mute your watch page, Warren. Warren, mute your watch page.
I have.
So, have you increased a different variable also at the same time, Milu?
How is that relevant?
Because you're trying to isolate variables, so you have one variable, so you can verify that as the sole cause of the effect. That's why you follow a scientific method and isolate your variables. So you don't have other things that interfere, regardless of whether or not you know they may or may not cause an effect. That's why you isolate things. So my question, would that be a different addition of a different variable to your different mass example that I've already written a new one?
Well, surface area is not something that you would need to control for. But
would you not? Oh, really? How do you know this?
How do you think it would affect the experiment?
Well, it might increase the surface area affected by the air pressure that you're also going to have in these experiments that I've seen affecting them. So this is nonsense. There are it's just a shit show of non-isolation. You're not isolating any variables. You haven't got a valid scientific hypothesis. Cavendish is nonsense. It's just a circus sideshow. It's not an experiment. No matter how much shite you go through here, that's never going to change. You've got balls in your shed telling you how much Mars weighs. Just accept it as the nonsense it is.
Well, Nathan, if you wanted to control for a surface area,
I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to discuss surface area. I don't care. Your Cavendish experiment is nonsense, right? And no matter how many times you try and explain how it doesn't matter that you've got non-isolated variables or that you haven't got a valid scientific hypothesis, it doesn't matter how many times you do this. I'm not going to accept it.
Negative and evil.
I think Goku wanted to say something.
He's not Goku. He's Chocolate Saiyan.
Chocolate Saiyan.
You can call me Chocolate.
Go ahead, Chocolate.
Got you, bro.
My question to you was in this Cavendish experiment, it's kind of like what Nathan was saying. Like how did he isolate the Earth's gravity as being a factor? Like how did he do that?
Well, in science, if you can't completely control the variable,
the God particle, by constantly going deeper and deeper into the subatomic and quantum.
Who's playing a video? Whoever's playing a video, can you turn it off?
Not me.
P Mars. Who's trolling on P Mars's account? Get out.
So Chocolate saying in the experiment, you're saying that the Earth's gravity would be a variable that you need to control for, right?
If you're going to conduct the experiment, right? I mean, the whole experiment was to see if there's any type of gravitational attraction between the balls, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would he take the gravity, quote unquote, gravity of the Earth out of the equation?
There's only one way to do it, and Cavendish doesn't do it.
No,
how would that be done?
There's only one way, and that is by completely negating the gravity, the downward acceleration force, by basically taking the experiment. It's going to be a lot more complicated to do, but I described this even a year ago in how it could be done, and that is you take these masses that you want to see if they actually attract each other, and you drop them in a perfect vacuum, and then because of that there's no air friction causing alternative deviations, and then only if they're falling then will that completely negate the gravity, the downward acceleration force. That is the only way it can properly be accounted for.
Well, what you've done is you've instead of control for Earth's gravity, you kind of did the opposite. You've made Earth's gravity effect on this experiment big.
No, it doesn't.
By dropping them.
No,
Well,
it
you're
is
dropping
then
them.
the downward
So
motion,
how do you-
which
the-
is
the
objects would
universally
have to
present,
reach
is then
some type of
no
terminal
longer a
velocity,
factor.
right?
No,
I can help
what
with
we're
this.
trying,
The
what we're
force
trying, what
is
we're trying to
basically
measure
at its
is the
zero
force
point
between
because
the
it
two
is
objects.
falling at free fall in a vacuum.
So
And then
so,
it's no longer a
Arwen,
factor.
Arwen, how would
Kent,
you? How
I
would
can
you
help you with this gravity issue.
but I
Do we-
wait. I was gonna respond to Arwen real quick. Sorry, Arwen.
Okay.
How would you measure the force between the objects if they're falling towards the ground?
That's very simple. If you take a long enough distance that they will fall in a vacuum, then you can
How long?
measure, even with lasers pointing at these objects as they fall in their downward path. And you can basically measure the difference of the starting height and then
Well,
the height how much they move closer towards each other as they
Right.
drop, and how much they have moved closer to each other when they hit the bottom.
But you understand that the force that mass exerts on other mass is it's not like magnets. I think you're thinking more like you're expecting like a magnetic.
No, that
I
is
think
what
what
gravity
Owen's
is
point
supposed to
is
do in your
that
theory.
that's the only way to take gravity out of the equation, and Cavendish didn't
It's
do
not.
that.
No, the
That's
way
the point.
the way Cavendish did it was by suspending the experiment. The
Yeah, but
experiment
that
needs.
doesn't work because the downward force
Yeah.
is still pulling.
Yeah, but we're not measuring downward force. We're measuring left to right
Yeah,
force.
but isn't it there? Isn't the gravitational pull from the Earth still pulling on these objects suspended?
Yeah, and
That's
you take that into
why
account
it would
when you.
only properly work, theoretically, if you drop
So-
it in a vacuum. Then the gravity of the Earth is negated because it is in free fall. And then
Yeah, it's false.
and these
It's-
subtle forces between the objects caused by so-called gravitational pull will just freely work. Just as in a diving plane, the
No,
effects
because
of buoyancy are negated and things, despite their density, just free float. And
yeah,
that's
but
the
this
only
experiment
way
that
you
you're
could
proposing
properly
would have to be.
attempt to prove gravitational pull.
Not an experiment.
I-
Arwen's not proposing an
I
experiment.
don't
and
care
Cavendish
about that.
wasn't an experiment. It's just
Arwen,
confirming
Just
the
see
concept.
if
You're
if there
proposing.
is
You're
some
proposing a
traction.
theoretical experiment, right?
No.
Right.
It's not
He's
an
proposing
experiment.
how
Okay.
to determine. He's proposing how to determine how to measure the pheromones of the female unicorn and the male unicorn. That's what he's proposing. Okay,
Right.
this is
Basically.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Oh,
It's
really?
not,
Is
though.
it?
What we're doing is
So-
affirming the consequence. So basically, we're saying if we've got larger masses attracting smaller masses because of gravity, well, then you're already affirming the consequent. You're saying if gravity, then larger masses attract smaller masses. The Cavendish experiment shows this, therefore gravity. Well, it's akin to saying if I eat a massive pizza, I am full. I am full, therefore I ate a massive pizza. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. But it's
That's
affirming
not
the
what- that's not
consequent.
what
You're
it
saying
is.
if gravity exists, and whenever we ask for examples of where gravity exists, you say it's negated by some other force, and we can't see it and we can't experience it. It's nonsense.
Well, Nathan, we're trying to prove whether or not
And you're
there is.
affirming the consequent. You've said if gravity, so you've made up this pseudo force, and then you get set out to try and prove it. So you're
No.
affirming the consequence. That's why the scientific method starts with observing natural phenomena, rather than just making some shit up and then setting
Well,
out to prove it.
We came up with a couple natural phenomena that would, that would make the experiment valid.
It's not an experiment. You don't have a valid scientific hypothesis. I keep telling you this, right?
No, just
Mass
'cause
is
Huey
a
told you that
concept.
it's-
How many times do I have to say this to you, right? It's really getting on my nerves. It cannot be and is not a cause of anything.
Well, anyway, the downward acceleration force, which is blatantly and obviously present, although
Mass
the
is not a
causal
cause of anything.
relations are not known to anyone that is honest. If you want to measure some presumed force of mass
Mhm.
attracting other mass, then you'll have, which is always expressed in motion. is expressed in motion and in pressure and in weight. It is basically expressed in a form of force. If you want to properly measure it and rule out the other factors, namely the gravity of Earth or the standard downward acceleration force, then you will have to drop it in a vacuum. And then that
Right,
force
Milo.
is neutralized.
Which
so
comes,
their
which goes
only
right back to
remaining
my
force
point.
will
And
then
how did
potentially
Cavendish?
be the
My-
gravity of objects
He
attracting one
controlled for
another.
gravity
So
by
that is the
suspending
only way to
experiment.
do it.
Right, can I speak with Milo a
The
sec?
gravity.
No, get ahead.
Go ahead.
Get ahead.
Go ahead.
Come on, I want to get on this
I
gravity
explained
point.
this
Let's-
in my own hangout in detail. So you want to
Let's-
check
No,
that out.
Arwen, you have a point, but the thing is that your
I do.
experiment would have to be in a tube that's several miles long, and that's
Why?
why the experiment
Why?
would work.
Why
Hey,
would it
but
have to be
you
several
understand
miles
that
long?
that the reason Arwen brought that up is because I asked how would he negate the gravity of Earth as being a factor in this experiment?
Right, let me answer
By
that.
That's the
dropping
thing. You
it in a
can't
vacuum.
completely negate
Right.
every variable.
Gents,
That's
come on.
why
Okay,
you.
so then how is it? So then
Come
how is
on,
the experiment
Come on,
valid?
let's just let
Gents.
Anthony get a word in. He's been waiting about.
Yeah,
Riley,
we've
go
been
ahead.
waiting
Go ahead,
patiently for
Riley.
ages. So
Go ahead,
Milo,
Riley.
let's start with the observed phenomena. Let's say that we observe that when we let go of a brick, it goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? That's the observed phenomena. The brick
Can
appears to go
Can
down.
you guys accept that as an observed phenomena, or is that a
Well,
valid one?
we're starting with your interpretation of an observed phenomena. Your observe, you will say, or you would argue that the brick falls to the earth, right? And
Right.
that your hypothesis would be that gravity is the cause. Yeah?
No, my hypothesis is that larger masses attract
Okay.
things of lesser
So
mass.
in this case, the earth would be
Don't
the
know what the
larger
cause
mass.
is yet.
The earth would be the larger mass, and the brick would be the smaller mass. Agreed?
Mhm. Yeah.
So a cause and effect relationship needs to be established to be able to prove anything with scientific status. Agree?
Right.
The cause is what they're trying to prove.
Wait, Alwyn, please. So we have the brick, we let go of the brick, and the argument is that gravity is the force that is attracting the brick to the bigger mass, the earth.
The thing is that, Anthony, we don't know that till after the experiment is concluded.
Okay,
So
but how do we
before-
prove? How do we prove that this attractive force between two objects of mass, in this instance being gravity the cause, how do we prove that while satisfying the scientific method? Now, this is where we have to go back to the definition of what gravity is. Do we apply Einsteinian, which for this case I'll say no, it's not the bending of space-time. Let's look at the definition for gravity under Newtonian gravity, which is.
But you're getting ahead of yourself already, because we have to.
Anthony,
this
I
experiment is
can
really-
answer that for him. I know you don't
Hang
like
on,
it when I do
hang
that.
on,
When I help
if
them.
we can agree that gravity is the attractive mass of two objects of mass, if we can agree that's the definition, and we're going to apply Newtonian gravity to it, then the only scientific solution to the problem that we pose, which is trying to prove the attractive force between two objects of mass, the only way to do that would be to get another planet of a greater mass than Earth and get it into a proximal relationship with the brick and move the distance forward and back. And that way you would prove gravity of mass is attracting the brick. It's the only way you could do it.
Well, before we get there, we have to accept or acknowledge that there's a force between masses.
Right. So you have to affirm the
Exactly.
consequent. That's exactly what I said. So you start off with the statement: if gravity exists, then masses will attract smaller masses. Right. That's affirming the consequent. You're saying if I'm full, I've eaten a massive pizza, because if gravity exists, then these masses will attract masses. Yeah, you're just affirming the consequent. That's what I said. That's what you came in and objected to, and I explained it to you.
You're not letting me talk.
Hey guys, interesting enough, the second part of the definition of phenomenon is the object of a person's perception, what the senses or the mind notice, the senses. Scientific method, yes.
The whole thing about my setup is that only if it actually works, then you actually have a phenomena that has been properly isolated from the gravity of Earth or the downward acceleration force of Earth, that you have an actual phenomena that you can then attempt to explain using a gravitational theory. So it is the start. My setup could potentially give you the phenomena that you could use.
Big shout out to 787GENX for the super chat.
Acceleration
Really appreciate
force.
it.
So
I just have
the force between the two masses in your experiment arm would be too weak to
No.
detect.
No.
Yes,
No,
because
that's
where they're
ridiculous.
flying,
No,
they're
it
flying
wouldn't. That's
towards the Earth.
ridiculous. No, that's not true. It's ridiculous.
They're flying towards the Earth, though.
I have two things to say just real quick. Right at the beginning of this, when you first said something about your consequent, I said, you mean presupposing your conclusion, and that here we are, we're back to it. Okay, so I said this at the beginning. That's what you're doing. Secondly, does anybody know how to capture a female unicorn so that we could measure the pheromone level? Anybody know how to do that?
Unfortunately, with the unicorns, the problem is that the light rays from the unicorn come in at such an acute angle to your eye that you never actually can see them. But if you get two balls and string them from a shed with magnifying glasses suspended from those balls, you can actually measure the effect the unicorns have on each other. It's amazing.
Wow.
Right. So let's
Yeah,
not.
but the problem.
So
the
just
problem
out of
with that
interest, I just
analogy-
need to hold on. I haven't made my point, Milu. Have you suspended these unicorns with magnifying glasses attached to balls to disprove this?
The problem with that analogy
Sorry,
is
have
that
you
we
have you
we
done it?
actually
Have you done
options.
this experiment? This experiment, this
actually-
really scientifically valid experiment that we're talking about. Have you done
on
it?
Earth? On Earth we actually have objects with mass.
Yeah, unicorns. Unicorns do have mass. Can you disprove that they have mass?
You have to do that.
No. You have to disprove it because that's your standards, right? You have to disprove
got
the
the claim.
unicorn's mass.
Look, Nathan, the way I would disprove it is if I had unicorns, I would do the experiment. But
All
I
right,
can't.
and if we had gravity, then that would be a useful thing if we observed gravity ever. But unfortunately, you conjure gravity out of this experiment, so it's just kind of affirming the consequent. You're just basically forming a logical fallacy here. You're not actually doing anything useful. You're certainly not performing any science. You don't have a valid scientific hypothesis, and the experiment is garbage. It's a sideshow circus.
Yeah.
So I'm trying
If
to
you actually
figure
want
out why
some
we can't
phenomena
test.
that you can attempt to scientifically use to prove your gravity theory, then I suggest you do what I do. And this entire notion that it's not big enough. No. According
No.
to the theory of gravity, that should not apply at all, because it doesn't
should.
matter what the mass is. It should always, on every scale, attract other masses, according to the theory of gravity. So,
But
if you
are we-
then isolate the gravity of the largest mass, the Earth, by letting
dropping
things
them.
free fall drop in a vacuum, then, only then, if the masses are moving towards each other in their trajectory downwards, then you have a potential phenomena that you could use as the foundation to actually scientifically prove that there is something like gravity. So
Arwen,
that's where you start.
You're aware that the Cavendish experiment takes hours to perform, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't negate the
this-
downward
so this-
acceleration
so this
force.
experiment
It
that you're
just
proposing-
suspends things. It doesn't work.
Man, have you,
The
had,
force
have
is
you
still
got any
pulling.
idea how
The force is
difficult
still
it is to
pulling
trap a
on it.
unicorn? I mean, it takes days to trap a unicorn, let alone two. So don't give me that sob story. Try trapping unicorns.
Well, you're arguing against my position based off a misunderstanding of it. So
Yeah, because you start with
We're
if
arguing
gravity,
with your
that's your
position
presupposition,
based off
right?
it
And you
doesn't
affirm that
happen in
by
real
going
life.
forward and performing this experiment, demonstrating nothing. So, yeah. It's a
Yeah,
logical,
and I brought this
another
up
logical
earlier.
fallacy
No, I
from
brought
the
this up earlier
Globers.
again. Right now, we're talking to a 13-year-old who doesn't like the fact that his father disagrees with the explanation for why he should be able to do something. The father clearly explains why it is, and the 13-year-old says, "You're not listening to me."
except that in this example, the father's wrong. So
Oh yeah, sorry, my bad. We should really understand how this balls-in shed dangling from a torsion bar does give us the accurate measurements for the weight of Mars. We should all accept this because that's precisely what it does. It's a marvellous piece of apparatus. We should all bow down to the balls in a shed because they tell us how much the Earth weighs. And don't you forget it, people of the audience. Cavendish was right, and his sideshow circus trick definitely tells you how much Venus weighs and Saturn weighs, because that's what you can do with it. Really, really clever stuff. Really scientific, even though it doesn't have a valid scientific hypothesis, even though it's an affirming the consequence formal logical fallacy, even though it doesn't actually prove a damn thing. Just accept that it can weigh Mars.
And it uses
Right.
R.
So I figure
You mean
I figure
right?
the claim.
Don't you pick up on the sarcasm? Didn't you pick up on that sarcastic tone? What I actually mean, just for the retard, is definitely don't accept that the Cavendish balls will ever give you a value for anything. It's just a circus show.
Okay, so I figure that if the claim is that mass attracts mass, we should be able to test this the same way we could test magnets by putting them next to each other.
You're literally
And we should-
describing a formological
you can't.
fallacy. I can't believe this. You're just affirming the consequent again. So you're saying, you're starting your statement with "if gravity exists." That's your starting statement. You just
Nathan,
don't get
but
it. You're just too stupid. Why have we spent 40 minutes explaining this
we
fallacy
can
to you,
move on to
Milo?
a different topic.
Why have
Sorry.
we spent 40 minutes explaining this logical fallacy to you? And then when we have to move past it just to let you have words, we finally get to the point where you tie down an independent variable, and it's a bloody concept. So it's not sinking in, mate. That's why I said it was
Mass is the
tedious about
reality.
20 minutes ago. It's still tedious now. You don't get it. I understand you don't get it. It's fine. But can we move on to something else now? Cavendish is nonsense. You don't have to accept it or like it. It's tough. It is nonsense. It's not science. It's just nonsense.
Yeah. If you just want
If
to
you
put
want
your
to
fingers in
properly-
your ears, that's fine.
If you want to
It's not
attempt
me
to
putting my
prove
fingers in my
gravity,
ears.
then
I've
you
listened
need
to you repeat your
isolate
nonsense several times.
phenomena
Right?
first.
You cannot form a scientific hypothesis to validate
Which
this
I did.
quasi-pseudoscience experiment. Right? It is not
Well, what's-
science. You are not establishing a cause and effect of anything. You are affirming the consequent. That's all you're doing. It's just another logical fallacy. Now, the fact that you're too stupid doesn't mean I'm not listening to you. I've listened to every shitty word that's come out of your mouth. None of it was useful. None of it was scientific. None of it proves anything. But you want to take that experiment and say to your friends and relatives that this gives you the weight of Mars. These balls dangling in a shed.
Well, if there was
It's
no
not gonna
attractive
work.
force between the masses, we
First, you
shouldn't
need
see
a-
it.
He's
a
even doing it in
properly
reverse now.
isolated
If there was no,
phenomena
so
that
you're
you
even
can
giving us a
attempt-
null. You're affirming the consequence in the null too. If there was no attractive force, right? Yeah, okay. This is pathetic. It's getting really irritating, Milu. You don't seem to understand. Your stupidity is beyond. It's beyond comprehension for me.
Well, let's talk about R then.
Yeah, brilliant. Let's change the subject to R. Where's your scientific
You
evidence
guys
of R?
don't want to talk about this.
Yeah, where's your scientific evidence for the R value that you use to presuppose almost every single argument that has anything to do with Earth's
Okay.
sphericity?
So before we get there,
And
I
that
don't think that
Cavendish
there's.
uses also.
Can I speak?
Go for it.
All right. So the distance between Brooklyn and Manhattan, I don't need any scientific evidence to prove that. You know, there isn't a scientific experiment that I can do to prove that. It's just a physical
Is there a
fact.
difference? Is
Oh,
there a
really?
difference
So what?
between the distance of Brooklyn and Manhattan and the radius of the Earth?
Wait, hold up. I can't hear you, dude.
I said, is there a difference between the distance of Brooklyn and Manhattan and
Uh-huh.
the radius of the Earth?
Well, I'm relating it to the circumference of the Earth. So if you take a measurement of the circumference of the Earth, you can
You
get
beg the question.
Okay, so let's brainstorm on
Taking a
on
measurement
how
of the
this could work.
circumference,
If you go west long enough, you'll end up in the same place you started. So how
So
can that work?
The question is, why do we have to brainstorm? The radius of the Earth was already figured out, right?
You want to know how we got to that point though?
Yeah.
How we can get to
Well,
that
I
point.
can
That would-
give
that
you
would be
several
nice.
explanations
That would be
that do
nice.
not require an R value.
Excuse
Do
me.
we know what the radius of Earth is? I
Well,
don't mean the value. Do we know what the measurement of the radius actually is? It's from the center of the Earth to the edge of the sphere, right?
Right.
So how do we measure that?
Well, do you trust the distances between continents and states and
Hi, Arev, is that really you?
Probably not.
Hello.
Oh shit! It was him, and I kicked him.
I don't think it was him.
That was
I
not
don't think it
Aaron.
was him.
No. Someone
He
put it
does
on
have an
the
active
back.
Doesn't
stock
sound
account
like
that does
that at
try and
all.
replicate himself, so it was preventative rather than curative. And if it was the real guy, I'm sorry.
Anyway, Milu is giving us an example, and I'm struggling to understand, even if you went between two cities, which should be absolutely on the edge of a sphere, where you get the actual spherical value between those two cities, if they were your example. Where do you get that it's a sphere when you're making a distance measurement between those two things?
No, I'm trying to get to the point where you can understand that you don't need scientific evidence to know the distances between things.
Right, who cares?
Who
Yeah,
cares?
you take a line from one place to another. How
Yeah,
does that?
Fair enough.
Where does
Yeah,
the
but
We'll
you're
accept that.
you're-
We'll
you're
accept
asking-
that you can measure a distance between two cities. Okay,
Yeah,
so
but you're
those two
asking me for
cities.
scientific
Hold
evidence.
on, Milu. Those two cities, are they
Mm-hmm.
sat on the edge of a sphere?
Excuse me?
Are they sat on the edge of a sphere or not? Are they on a flat plane or on a sphere?
Yeah, I believe it's on a sphere.
And how do you know that? How do you get, for instance, the radius?
Well, he believed it. He said belief. He believes it.
All right, so I want to get to the point where you guys can understand where I'm going. Can I talk?
Well, let's talk about
Got a
radius.
pretty good
Where-
idea where you're going.
You
dude.
brought up this subject, Milu.
Yeah, the
Okay.
radius is measured as, or it's defined as the center of the Earth to the circumference, to the edge. Correct.
Right.
So,
So
how do we measure that?
So let me ask you, Anthony. Can you find the radius of a globe, given the circumference?
If you presuppose it's a globe, yes.
Okay, but if I gave you a circumference, can you tell me the radius of?
If you presuppose it's a globe, yes.
I could give you the radius of the circle. What we're trying to figure out is how you get from travelling in a circle to the Earth being a sphere. Because so far you've gone, I travel in a circle, but we don't get the connection. We're failing to see this, Milu. We
Right.
don't understand.
Well, I'm trying to go in steps. I don't want to jump so far.
Oh, we're keeping up. Don't worry about us.
Okay, awesome. So you guys would say that we're instead of it being a globe.
Don't say
we're
anything about
actually
what we
going-
would say. Don't worry about what we would assert. Just tell us how you get the radius.
Okay, well, going west so far that you end up
Yeah, we've
in your
heard all
starting
this.
point.
We've heard all this. Do you want to move on to your next step?
Is that well? I want to know if you guys think that's possible.
You're
Well, you
just
have to
giving us an
presuppose a
explanation.
sphere.
Yeah, it is
just take
possible.
us to the next step that gets you to the
don't have
radius.
you don't have to presuppose a sphere. It could be flat, and you're going in a right turn or in a left turn.
Okay.
Making a
Okay.
circle.
You can
Yeah,
go
we
straight
understand
ahead,
that. Hold on, Arwin.
and then
We
you can end
understand
up
that.
the
We've
same
got
place.
this. We've heard all this. So how do you get to the R of a sphere? Where's that step?
Right. So you have to find the circumference first. So
Okay.
the
Sorry, the circumference of what? A sphere or a circle?
Well, if it's on a flat Earth, it's a circle, and the equator
No,
would be
doesn't have to
25,000.
be.
Huh?
No,
Don't
it does.
assume
have to
what
be.
it
That's
has to
only-
be on a
that's
flat
the
plane,
disk
right?
model.
Just, Arwin, don't have this argument, right? You are giving us an example. So far, no connection to sphericity. I'm still yet to hear any connection.
I'm trying to get to the point where you understand that it
So
can
get
only
there.
exist on a sphere.
A bit quicker.
Okay, so the equator on your model and on my model is 25,000 miles around,
Okay.
right?
I haven't proposed a model.
straight ahead.
Shh, hold on. Don't worry about my model.
Also counts. Come on.
Arwin, just we haven't proposed anything. You are telling us how you come to this R value, the radius of a sphere. So you tell us, don't worry about what we assert.
Okay. The circumference of the Earth is the longest distance you can travel in any direction on Earth.
If you presuppose a globe.
Arwin, just let him speak.
He hasn't done yet. He hasn't done
Anthony,
yet.
just let him get through. I'm sure the next thing out of his mouth will be the connection between that and a sphere. I'm sure it will.
Alright.
He's nearly there.
I
We
agree.
just need to give
So
him enough
the-
chance.
So the equator is the largest circle we can do around the Earth. We can't
Okay.
go any more miles than that,
Okay.
right? So
No idea.
above the
I don't know
equator,
why you've... Hold on. You've just made a statement. Don't know that. Don't know that at all. But
that's
Right.
well, that's why I wanted to establish whether or not you believe the distances.
not
we are
doing
accurate.
beliefs, right? This is why I define how I want the evidence. I want it verified scientifically, because apparently the globe is backed by science. But at the moment, we've got some wishy-washy nonsense story about travelling in circles. No sphericity has been established yet. So when are you going to
Nathan,
get to this establishing a sphere? When are you going to get to that bit, Milu? How long is this going to take?
We've already established that you don't need scientific evidence to prove distances between states and cities and oceans.
We're not. We're establishing whether or not the Earth's a sphere. So we're not measuring between states. Shh. We're not doing that. So don't strawman us. We're trying to establish where you get the R value from. You're just not telling us. Is it a secret?
If you follow the distances in the equator...
I've heard this. How many times do you have to repeat the same crap? I've heard this. What's the next step? Where do you get to the R value from there?
Well, you've already found the circumference.
Of a circle?
So?
Of a circle?
Well, that's my next point. But below the equator is a shorter circuit, and above the equator is a shorter circuit than the equator. How do you know that?
So you say?
Because of the distances between...
Sorry, how do you know this? How do you know this?
Because we know the distances between states. We know the distances between
continents. That's a bit of an extrapolation and a jump in order to say that the sphere Earth has a lower equator value.
I'm gonna just
No. We're nearly there, Milu. I still haven't got to how you conclude sphericity doing this travelling in circles thing. You keep telling us that you've got a radius of a circle. So where's the sphere come from? I don't get it.
Can you see my screen?
Just tell us. Next step. Right. What is it?
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see a flat Earth map.
All right, awesome. This is the equator right here.
No. That's not a sphere, is it?
Well, I'm trying to show you how it can't work on a flat map. So
I don't care how it doesn't work on some straw man that you have asserted we assert. We haven't presented a model here. Okay? Didn't you hear me the first time I said that? When I said don't assert what we are asserting, you tell me how you get to this R value. You brought it up. Now you're trying to strawman us with some argument we don't present. I don't give a crap what other idiots think the Earth looks like based on this map you want me to present. You tell me where you get R.
Well, Nathan, this is a valid map because if you start
I don't care. It's not a spherical map. I want to know how you get R, not about this map. I don't care. Is this your map? Are you saying the Earth is this flat pancake? Because I'm not saying it and I don't care. I want to know how you get to a sphere. This isn't a sphere. It's just a straw man. Tell me how you get a spherical R.
But because of the circumference of the Earth.
That's not a sphere. I keep saying this is too dumb. Yeah, it's a circle. You too dumb to listen? Where's the connection? Where do you get the sphere bit?
I'd like to know how you think that map is valid if you live on a ball.
I don't. I think it's a logical thing that you would have to do if you think we're living on a flat Earth. Because
I don't care what you think we should do.
You travel around.
Shh, shut up! I don't care about this straw man. You're not going to tell this panel or my audience about what you think we think. I don't care about this straw man. You haven't established any connection to a spherical Earth. None. So when's it coming? You brought this subject up.
He told us you measure the distance between cities on the flat plane. You measure those distances.
Measure the distances.
It's circular reasoning. How do you know you're on a sphere? You measure the circumference. How do you measure the circumference? You measure the distance between cities on a flat plane.
No. It's the longest. The thing is that the circumference is the longest distance you can travel in any one direction.
In a circle, not necessarily in a sphere shape. No,
what's that?
You don't get it. You're just not getting it. You can't say I've travelled in a circle, therefore I'm on a sphere. Is that what you're?
So what else could you be on?
Is this how you get R? Is this
what else could you be on?
Sorry, answer my question. Is this the end of your assertion that you can prove R?
Nathan, how can you start in
yes
one point,
or no?
go west,
is that the end? I don't want any more nonsense unless there is actually another step to come. Have you finished, or is there another step to get to sphericity? Yes or no?
Yeah, below the equator is a shorter circuit. Above the equator is a shorter circuit, and above that is an even shorter circuit. Above that is an even shorter circuit, and the same goes for south of the equator. It's a shorter circuit. You cannot go a larger distance in one direction than the equator below it because it's impossible because it's shorter. It's a shorter distance around the Earth.
How do you know it's shorter?
Because we know the distances between objects on Earth.
Do we?
Yes, we do.
Who says you... Have you measured this? Have you got scientific validity to any of these assertions? I lay down a standard for a reason, so that dickheads like you don't come along and just say, yeah, of course we know the distances between the cities. Well, then you show me a realistic world map with everything in exactly the situated place, with the exact distances. You show me that working.
Sure. Google Earth.
That's not a working model. Every single time we have a debate and reference Google Earth, we get told it's not your model.
Because of elevation, because it doesn't show accurate elevations.
So it's got flaws.
Yeah.
So your side of the argument has told us we are debunked in our assertions based on us using this non-model because it doesn't represent your Earth, according to your side of this argument. So why are you taking me to Google Earth? By your own side's admission, this is not a model of Earth.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, well, then you're just a denier. Everyone else on your side of the argument disagrees. And when we use this model, we get told, no, you can't use this because it's not representative. It doesn't represent our world. That's what we get told.
Well, they're wrong then.
So you just cherry pick. You just pick whichever model best suits at whatever given time, right?
If I want to show the distances between objects on Earth, then yeah, I can use this.
It's not a sphere. It's not a sphere. It's not a sphere. It's a 2D representation, isn't it? None of it's fixed. It's a 2D rendering. You don't get to measure distances on it because it's 2D. You can't see the back of it.
This is 2D?
Yeah, it's on a screen. Are you an idiot?
So what do you want me to show you? A globe?
A sphere.
How can I show you a sphere on a 2D screen?
Well, I certainly know for a fact that a 2D rendering from a computer program is not spherical. It's a rendering.
No, this is a 3D rendering.
It's a rendering, right? It's not a physical object. I can't run a tape measure over it and measure distances and scale them. It's just a rendering. How do I know when you spin that globe the distances don't change? I have no idea. I don't get access to the software.
Nathan, but that level of
excuse me, you don't seem to be addressing any of my concerns. You can't show me a working globe model. There is non-existence. There isn't one.
Hey Nathan.
I'm showing you one right now.
No, that's Google Earth.
Not getting anywhere. I have a proposition in how they could actually physically measure sphericity or a curve using triangulation. There is basically only one way to do it without presuming that a set distance is curved. And it's probably not going to work out for them, but there is a way. And that way is by digging a straight hole, a tunnel, in a perfect measured straight line, slightly tilted downwards, and then if you're actually going to end up back at the surface, then if you take the exact distance of that straight tunnel to the other side of the surface, and then you measure over the presumed curve over land that same distance, if the distance from the start of that tunnel to the end of the tunnel is shorter than the distance over land, then you could possibly start to prove and to basically to triangulate the radius. And that's the only possible way to do it ever.
Fair enough. And with that, I think I'll say first and foremost a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the live panel for making this debate possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of the audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this debate. If you hated the show, then you know exactly what to do. But if you like the show, maybe consider sharing it with a friend or subscribing if you have not done so already. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!